They say silence is safe, that if you keep your head down, keep your voice low and your hoodie up, you won't get in trouble, you won't draw fire, you won't give them a reason. But here's the truth, for a black boy in America, silence isn't protection, it's erasure. This story isn't about a viral protest. It's not about screaming through megaphones or smashing windows. It's about something harder. It's about a teenager who walked into school wearing a hoodie and left wearing a story that shook the walls of his town. His name was Elijah Carter, 16 years old, quiet, sharp, thoughtful. The kind of kid who wrote poems no one ever read. The kind of kid who walked home with his hoodie pulled low, not because he had something to hide, but because the world kept trying to strip him bare. Fairgrove High was the kind of school where diversity was a brochure word, where black students were counted but not heard, where the loudest voices wore cheer uniforms and privilege like perfume. And Savannah Whitmore, she was the crown jewel of that world, rich, white, untouchable. Until she tried to turn Elijah into a joke, a meme, a headline. It started with a photo in a grocery store. It became a lie, then a threat, then a call to the police. And in the middle of it all, Elijah never raised his voice, never swung, never ran. He just stood, and that scared them more than anything. This is the story of what happens when quiet refuses to disappear, when a hoodie becomes more than fabric, when it becomes a flag, when a father steps out of the shadows, not with fists but with truth, and when a school that thought it could bury a boy beneath its silence learns. Some kids don't stay buried. They rise and they walk. If you've ever been told to shrink, if you've ever been seen as a threat just for breathing, if you've ever stayed quiet when the world should have heard you, this story is for you, because this isn't just Elijah's story. This is a silent power story, and the hoodie it still walks on. Elijah Carter didn't talk much, didn't laugh loud, didn't hang out in big groups or walk the halls like he owned the place. He wasn't that kind of kid. What he was, though, was observant. He saw everything, every glance, every pause when he walked into a room. Every time someone clutched their purse a little tighter or looked around to see if he was followed by friends. In Fairgrove, Ohio, that wasn't rare. It was just routine. He wore the same blue hoodie almost every day, not because he didn't have others, but because this one felt safe. It was soft from wear, frayed at the sleeves with a faded logo from some middle school track team. He was never really part of, but it fit. Not just his body, but the person he had learned to become invisible. He didn't want attention, didn't need it. At 16, Elijah already understood that attention wasn't always something you wanted when you were young. Black and wearing a hoodie. He lived with his mom and little brother in a two-bedroom apartment on the south edge of town, right behind the highway. It was loud at night but cheap, and the landlord mostly left them alone. His mom worked nights at the hospital, 12-hour shifts as a nurse, sometimes more when another nurse called out. She was the strongest person he knew, but also the most tired. That day she had texted him while he was walking home from school. "Can you grab milk and fruit? Jordan finished the cereal again. Love you." So now he was here at Myers Market, with $7 in a crumpled list written on the back of a Walgreens receipt. He held it in one hand, phone in the other, earbuds in, but no music playing, just noise-canceling silence. He didn't expect anything different, just another quiet Thursday. But sometimes even the quietest places crack. It happened near the produce aisle. The store smelled like old lemons and floor wax. There was a soft hum from the fridges and a Kenny Loggins song playing overhead that no one under 45 could name. He liked it here, not because it was special, but because it wasn't. No one bothered you in Myers, not unless they had to. He walked past the lettuce, turned toward the citrus bin. That's when he saw her. She stood by the apple's thin frame, white hair pulled tight into a perfect bun, pearls, A cream-colored cardigan buttoned all the way to her throat, even though it was 78 degrees outside. She held her purse like a shield, her back straight as a flagpole. He had seen her before, maybe at church, maybe at a town parade. Elijah didn't think twice, just stepped forward. Keeping space between them, reached for a bag of oranges, and "You people don't belong here." At first, he thought maybe she was talking to someone else, but there was no one else around. He froze, hand hovering over the fruit. The oranges blurred for a second in his peripheral vision. The chill from the produce cooler hit his arms. A second passed, then another, and then she said it again, louder, clearer. "Go back to Africa." The words dropped like a plate shattering on tile. Behind him, someone sucked in a breath. A teenage employee stacking bananas froze mid-motion. A woman near the cucumbers turned her cart sharply and wheeled her toddler away. No one said a word, but now everyone was watching. Elijah turned slowly, deliberately, his hands still at his sides, his hoodie still up, casting just enough shadow to hide the fire building behind his eyes. The old woman didn't flinch, didn't look away. Her mouth was tight, her eyes colder than the freezer aisle. He could feel every eye on him, could sense the tension pulsing between the rows of apples and oranges. He was used to this town's polite racism, the fake smiles, the sideways comments. But this was bolder. This was the kind they whispered about but rarely heard aloud. He could have said 1,000 things, could have walked away, could have shouted, could have cried. But instead he straightened his spine, shifted his basket to his left hand, and said calmly, "Ma'am." "Do you even hear yourself?" Elijah's voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It floated through the silence like a match striking in a gas-filled room, calm, controlled, but unmistakably burning. The woman blinked at him. Not confused, indignant. "I said what I said." She snapped, "This is my country, and people like you don't belong in it." That was the second slap, not with a hand, not with violence, but with something colder. Older, a language Fairgrove knew well, even if it pretended not to. Across the aisle, a young white woman near the bread rack gasped softly. She didn't say anything, just clutched her canvas tote tighter and backed her cart away, like stepping further from the scene might make it less real. The teenage clerk still hadn't moved from the banana stand. His hand hovered midair, a bunch of fruit forgotten. His mouth was slightly open. He looked like he wanted to do something, say something, but wasn't sure how to move. No one else stepped forward. No one said a word. And in that vacuum of silence, Elijah stood taller. Not out of pride, not out of ego, but because he had to. Because this was how it started, the sideways glances, the half-spoken comments, the passive prejudice that sharpened like a knife when no one called it out. He didn't yell, didn't raise a finger. He just looked her in the eye and said, "Let's talk about that." Since you brought it up, the woman shifted just slightly. Her grip on the apple in her hand tightened. "My name is Elijah Carter," he said. "Born in Montgomery, Alabama. My mother's a nurse. My father served 2 tours overseas and now works as a civil engineer in Columbus. My grandparents lived in this country through Jim Crow, marched for their right to vote, and paid taxes like everyone else. So when you say I don't belong here," he let the words hang, a beat too. The only sound was the hum of the cooler. "You're not just wrong, you're denying history." The woman opened her mouth to speak, but for once nothing came out. He continued. "My great-grandfather was born in 1894, fought in World War I, came back home and wasn't allowed to vote because of his skin. My great-grandmother cleaned houses until her fingers bled. They saved up for land that was stolen through legal loopholes and threats." He looked around now, not just at her, but at the crowd gathering, still pretending they weren't watching. "You want to talk about who belongs?" His voice didn't rise, but it filled the space now. Stronger, sharper. "I belong because this land, this store, This town was built on the backs of people who look like me, who were told the same thing you just told me, who were told to go back somewhere they'd never even been. His hands were steady now, hanging by his sides, his hoodie still up, shadowing the fire in his eyes. But everyone could see it now, the strength, not defiance, not aggression, dignity. The woman's lips pressed into a thin white line. Her eyes darted to the side as if looking for someone, anyone to back her up. But the aisle had grown still. The clerk looked away. The woman by the bread rack had frozen in place. Even Karen at Register 3 was craning her neck now, one hand frozen above the scanner. For the first time, the old woman looked uncertain. Elijah bent down and calmly picked up the bag of oranges he dropped. Now he said, holding them in one hand, his voice flat but firm, "Are we done here? Or would you like to keep embarrassing yourselves?" She didn't answer. Instead, she clutched her purse, turned stiffly, and walked away, cart rattling down the aisle. Her silence suddenly louder than anything she'd said before. Elijah didn't follow, didn't celebrate, didn't even smirk. He just turned back toward the produce bin, selected a second bag of oranges, this one even fresher, and dropped it into his cart. Then he kept walking as if nothing had happened, but something had. The silence left behind felt different now. Not the silence of shame, not the silence of fear. It was the silence of a crowd learning something they hadn't wanted to admit. And Elijah, he just kept moving. Hoodie up shoulders, square eyes steady. Because he wasn't there to prove anything. He was there for milk, cereal, and oranges. And that was reason enough. Elijah made his way down the next aisle like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. He could feel it in the way people stepped aside as he passed, not out of fear, but reverence. Like they just witnessed something holy, or maybe something they were ashamed to admit they'd needed to see. No one spoke to him, but they watched, eyes lingering longer than usual. Not with suspicion this time, with something else, respect. He stopped by the dairy fridge, grabbed a gallon of 2% milk, and cradled it in one arm. His cart was light milk, cereal, and oranges, but his back felt lighter now, too. There was something freeing about not backing down, not for show, not for anger, but because sometimes you had to remind people that you weren't a shadow. At the register, he got in line behind a guy in a camo jacket and a MAGA hat. The man didn't turn around, didn't nod, but when it was Elijah's turn to load his items onto the belt, the man quietly handed him a coupon for the milk. Elijah looked at it, then looked at him. The man didn't say a word, just nodded once and walked out the door. Karen, the cashier, looked shaken. Her hands moved more carefully now, gently sliding the barcode reader over each item as if afraid the beep might break something. "You okay?" she asked softly, not making eye contact. Elijah shrugged. "Yeah, just grocery shopping." She bit her lip, then glanced around before leaning closer. "Some of us heard what she said. Just in case you thought we didn't." He looked at her, saw something in her face that looked like apology but heavier. "I know," he said. When he stepped out of Myers, the spring air hit him like a breath of clarity. The sun was lower now, casting golden light across the parking lot. His hoodie warmed under it, but he didn't take it off. He liked how it felt today. Like armor, he crossed the lot and unlocked his bike from the rack. Slid the grocery bag into the basket up front, double-checking the milk cap was tight. Then he swung his leg over the frame and pushed off with one foot. As he pedaled down the street, past the barber shop, past the church where nobody ever talked about race, from the pulpit, past the row of houses with flags and manicured lawns, he wasn't thinking about what had just happened. He was thinking about tomorrow, about school, about his little brother Jordan, who would wake up and pour cereal into his bowl, like nothing had changed, but something had. And when Jordan asked, "Why are these oranges so good?" Elijah would just smile and say, "Picked them myself." Because Jordan didn't need to carry the weight yet, not all of it. That night, Elijah lay on the couch with his feet hanging over the armrest. His mom was asleep in her scrubs, head tilted back, mouth open, just enough to snore lightly. She hadn't even eaten dinner, just walked in, kissed his forehead, and collapsed. He watched her breathe, watched the way her chest rose and fell like waves she'd been swimming against her whole life. Then he looked down at his hoodie. Still on, still zipped halfway. He remembered what the woman had said. Go back to Africa. He looked around the living room, framed photos, the beat-up coffee table, the smell of laundry detergent still clinging to the couch pillows. This was Africa, this was home, because home is where your people survived, where they refused to disappear. Elijah stood up, walked to the window and pulled the curtain back. Outside, the street was quiet. A porch light flickered across the road. The world didn't look different, but he did. Because today he hadn't been invisible. He hadn't exploded, hadn't run, hadn't smiled to make others comfortable. He'd just spoken. He let the curtain fall back into place, turned off the lamp and headed to bed. And just before he drifted off, hoodie still on, he whispered something to himself. Something simple, something that wasn't for the woman in the store, or the clerk, or even his mother. It was for him. They saw me today, and that was enough. By Monday, the Whisper network had caught fire. It started small, barely a flicker. A teacher in the break room mentioned something about an incident at Myers. A pastor's wife leaned in close during fellowship hour and asked, "Did you hear about that Carter boy?" By Tuesday, it had turned into speculation layered with suspicion. He caused a scene. She didn't say it like that. You know how those types overreact. Elijah didn't say anything. Not to the classmates who suddenly stared a little longer. Not to the custodian who gave him a fist bump and muttered, "Keep your head up." Not even to Jordan, who noticed that Elijah wasn't walking quite as relaxed anymore. He didn't need to. He felt it all in the air. The shifting weight of being seen. At Fairgrove High, there weren't many black students. Maybe 11, depending on whether Mariah counted herself that day or not. Most of them had figured out their survival lanes. Sports silence or pretending Elijah had always leaned toward silence. He moved through the halls like a ghost with a schedule. Locker 114, math in room. B7, lunch in the far corner near the vending machine. Always the last table, always alone. He didn't mind. It was safer to orbit the school than be part of its center. But Fairgrove had a center, and her name was Savannah Whitmore. Savannah was the kind of girl movies were written about: long, golden hair, laugh like sunlight, and a last name that came with real estate and influence. Her grandfather was a judge, her father a city councilman, her mom PTA president, charity chair, and the unofficial mayor of the local Facebook group. Savannah didn't bully people the way you see in movies. She was more delicate than that. She didn't shove. She excluded. She didn't call names, she whispered them. And when she laughed at you, she always did it with friends, so that even your silence would echo louder than her words. She was Fairgrove's queen, and she had noticed Elijah for the first time. It started the same day the Myers incident became hallway currency. During third period, Savannah walked past Elijah's desk in history class and accidentally dropped a note on his textbook, a tiny folded square with 2 words scrawled in glittery pen. Africa, huh? He didn't open it, didn't even blink. He just slid it off his desk and onto the floor. That's when the giggle came. From behind him, then from across the room, a wave soft and rolling. Savannah never looked back. She just high-fived a friend on the way to her seat. The teacher didn't notice or pretended not to. Later that day in the cafeteria, Elijah reached the lunch line and noticed his usual table was already half filled with people he didn't recognize. A few glances were cast his way, quick cutting. One girl leaned over to another and whispered, "That's him, the one from the store." He picked up his tray and moved to the outdoor tables instead. No one followed. In gym class, it got bolder. During flag football, Savannah tossed the ball toward him with a little too much force. It hit him square in the chest. Oh, sorry, she sang hand over mouth. Didn't mean to throw it that hard. More giggles. He tossed it back light, calm, no malice. But the air was shifting again. At first, Elijah didn't think much of it. He lived in this town long enough to know how these things spread. People didn't need facts. They just needed an excuse. But what bothered him wasn't the whispers. It was the attention. For a boy who spent his life trying to stay invisible, being seen now felt more like being hunted. That night he didn't tell his mom she was too tired. Her eyes were red from 2 shifts back to back, and her voice was hoarse from lecturing patients who wouldn't take their meds. He just kissed her cheek, helped Jordan with his math homework, and went to bed. He lay there in the dark, hoodie still on phone screen, dim against his chest. One text had come in unknown. Number better start packing. I hear Africa's nice this time of year. He didn't respond. Instead, he locked the phone, pulled the hood over his head, and whispered to himself, still not breaking. Wednesday morning came with a different kind of chill. It wasn't in the air. It was in the stairs. The moment Elijah stepped into the school's main hallway, he could feel it, the way conversations paused when he walked past, the way laughter resumed only after he was a few steps away. Some kids tried to be subtle, nudging each other and murmuring behind notebooks. Others didn't bother. They turned to look at him directly like he was a character from a show they'd all seen. But he hadn't auditioned for Elijah said nothing. He kept walking, hoodie up, head high, eyes straight. At his locker, there was a sticky note waiting for him. Someone had scribbled over it with a thick black Sharpie. Know your place. He peeled it off, slowly, crumpled it in one hand, and dropped it into his backpack. Not the trash. Not the hallway. He didn't need anyone else to pick it up and give it life again. First period was biology, and he took his usual seat in the second row. He kept his hands folded on the desk, waiting for the teacher to begin. Then Savannah walked in. This time she made a show of choosing the desk behind him. That wasn't her seat. She usually sat near the window with her 2 best friends, but today she wanted a front row view of whatever drama she was scripting. The teacher, Mr. Templeton, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He was the kind of teacher who taught mitochondria like it was poetry, but never got involved in student politics. 5 minutes into the lecture, a small crumpled ball of paper bounced off Elijah's right shoulder and landed on his notebook. He didn't look back, he didn't touch it, but he could hear the giggle behind him. Light, sharp, practiced. Savannah leaned forward and whispered, just loud enough. Thought you people were supposed to be fast. Guess not. A few students snorted. One of them tried to turn it into a cough. Mr. Templeton didn't notice or didn't want to. Elijah stared straight ahead. He didn't respond, didn't even blink. But inside something hardened. Not anger, not sadness. Something else, resolve. In second period, things escalated. On the whiteboard in English class, someone had drawn a stick figure with big red lips and scribbled above it, Elijah the African King. Ms. Dunleavy erased it before class started, her face pale, her hands shaking slightly. But she didn't say a word to the class. She just moved on like it hadn't been there, like it hadn't happened. That's what Fairgrove did best, erasure by silence. At lunch, Elijah didn't even try to sit in the cafeteria. He grabbed a carton of chocolate milk, an apple, and a peanut butter sandwich from the lunch line and slipped out the side door that led to the bleachers behind the gym. It was quiet out there. A little windy, but peaceful. He sat alone, hoodie still on headphones over his ears, but no music played. Just the hum of wind and distant traffic. His phone buzzed again. Another text. No name attached, everyone's laughing at you. Just wait for Friday. He didn't reply. He just closed the screen and put the phone face down on the bench beside him. Later that afternoon during art class, Savannah struck again. As he walked past her easel to rinse his brushes at the sink, she let out a loud fake cough, then said, "Ugh, it smells like foreign food in here." Laughter rippled around the room. The teacher paused, looked up but said nothing. Elijah turned slowly. Their eyes met. She held his gaze, smirking, waiting for him to lash out, waiting for him to give her the reaction she could twist into aggression. He didn't give her that. Instead, he said, just loud enough for the class to hear, "Your jokes are weak, Savannah, but your desperation, that's loud," and he walked away. That night, as Elijah sat on the edge of his bed, knees bent, hoodie still on, he looked at his reflection in the dark window. He didn't look tired. He didn't look angry. He looked ready, because deep down he knew what was happening. Savannah wasn't trying to make a point. She was trying to break him, but she'd made one mistake. She picked the wrong quiet boy to test. Friday came fast and colder than expected. The spring sun had vanished behind a sheet of gray, and the wind cut sharp through the hallways as students packed into Fairgrove High, like cattle moving on autopilot toward lockers and classrooms. But the weather wasn't what made the day feel different. It was the silence before the storm. Elijah could feel it the moment he stepped through the school's main doors. There was a buzz, a static hum in the air. People glanced at him, then quickly looked away like they didn't want to be caught watching. There was too much eye contact from the wrong people, too much whispering from the ones who usually didn't notice he existed. Something was coming. By mid-morning, it was clear this wasn't just a regular day. In homeroom, Elijah noticed more than one student staring at their phones, smirking behind cupped hands. The teacher, Miss Randall, barely looked up from her laptop. No one said anything directly, but the energy, it was thick, sour, heavy like fog before rain. He got his first clue during his second period. Someone had slipped a flyer under his desk, folded 3 times, carefully placed so he wouldn't miss it. He waited until class ended before opening it. Inside, printed in black and white, was a grainy photo of him, hoodie up, standing in the produce aisle at Mayor's Market. But his face had been distorted, eyes enlarged, red bloodshot, mouth twisted into a cartoonish grin with jagged teeth. The caption above it scrawled in bold Sharpie font, "African threat, don't feed the hoodie." His stomach dropped. He looked around, suddenly aware of how many students were laughing quietly in corners, huddled around lockers, hands over mouths, phones in hand. The photo wasn't just in the flyer, it was online. By lunch, it was everywhere. Someone had edited the image into a meme and blasted it through a fake Instagram account, One Fairgrove Tea. The post had over 600 views within the hour. The caption read, "Straight out of the jungle, Elijah Carter, the local activist. Here to steal your groceries and your daughters. Go back to Africa, Fairgrove freak show." The comments were worse. "He looks like a school shooter, TBH. Bet he's got a machete in that hoodie. Is it racist if it's true?" No one tagged him directly, but everyone knew it was about him. Elijah sat under the bleachers again that day. Same spot, same hoodie, same sandwich. But something was different now. He wasn't alone. He was isolated. It wasn't the same, because now the silence around him wasn't just indifference, it was strategy. The school had closed in. Decided he was the story of the week, a target painted in shadows and stereotypes. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He didn't go to the principal. He just sat there chewing the same peanut butter sandwich he had eaten 3 times this week, staring at the cracked pavement under his feet, remembering his mother's words. "Baby, if they ever try to make you small, that's when you stand up straight, not loud, just tall." After school, as he was unlocking his bike near the fence, he heard her voice behind him. "Savannah." "Hey, hoodie boy," she said. He didn't turn, didn't flinch. "You should thank me." She continued, leaning casually against the railing, one leg crossed over the other. "Before this week, no one even knew your name. Now you're famous." He turned slowly, just enough to look at her over his shoulder. "No," he said, "now you're infamous." She blinked. "Excuse me." Elijah locked eyes with her, calm still. "You showed them who you are, not me." Then he got on his bike, hands steady on the handlebars, and pedaled away. That night he didn't sleep much. He sat at the kitchen table long after Jordan went to bed. His mom was working late again. The apartment was still save for the ticking of the microwave clock and the occasional groan of the fridge. He pulled out the flyer again, laid it flat on the table, looked at it, really looked at it. The twisted version of his face, the hoodie, the words. He didn't see fear. He saw projection. They were afraid of him because they couldn't touch him. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't swung. He hadn't begged. And that made him dangerous. Not because he was violent, but because he was still standing. He folded the flyer again this time, smaller, tighter, and tucked it inside his hoodie pocket. He stood, pulled the hoodie over his head, looked in the mirror by the door. The same reflection stared back, but something in his eyes had changed. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was preparing. Monday morning hit harder than most. The weekend hadn't brought peace. The memes were still up. The Fairgrove T account was still active, still feeding followers with fresh content, each post meaner than the last. They'd taken another photo of Elijah, this time from behind, as he walked through the hallway on Friday, captioned it, "The hoodie returns, hide your GPA." By Sunday night, even students from the neighboring school in Hillcrest were reposting it. Comments poured in from usernames Elijah didn't even recognize. "Dude's a whole creep. Why is he still at Fairgrove? Plot twist. He owns a machete and a scholarship." The thing about hate in a small town is that it doesn't need facts to survive. Just a spark, just a name, and a black boy in a hoodie was the perfect kindling. Elijah stood at the front gates of Fairgrove High and looked up. The flagpole was still wrapped in last week's cheer banners. The front lawn was freshly mowed. Everything looked normal, but he knew it wasn't. He stepped through the glass doors and braced himself. Eyes everywhere, like motion detectors on max sensitivity. He walked to his locker in silence. The hall around him was louder than usual. Laughs, squeaks of sneakers, the occasional bark of a teacher wrangling freshmen, but all of it dimmed as he opened locker 114 and pulled out his books. Taped to the inside of the locker door was another photo, the same image from Myers Market, but now printed on neon green paper with one word typed in bold beneath threat. Elijah stared at it for a second, then peeled it down, folded it, stuffed it in the pocket of his hoodie. Same routine. Different day. Third period came fast, American literature. Elijah walked in early, took his seat near the back and pulled out his notebook. Mrs. Rayburn, a white woman in her 60s with cat-eye glasses and a permanent frown, stood at the front, tapping notes into the projector. The room filled slowly. One by one, students trickled in. Most avoided eye contact with him. A few didn't bother. Then Savannah walked in. Today her hair was braided into a loose crown, and her nails freshly done clicked against her phone as she typed rapidly. She didn't look at him. Didn't need to. The whole room was already looking. 10 minutes into class, just as Mrs. Rayburn began discussing the crucible, the room lights suddenly flickered, then dimmed, a low buzz, then a click. Then on the whiteboard screen, a video started to play. No one had touched the projector. Elijah looked up, blinking. The room was still silent, watching. Then it began. It was him. A video clearly edited started with the photo from the grocery store. Then jump cuts of him walking through the hallway, slowed down, distorted. The image was grainy but clear enough. The audio had been layered over with jungle sounds, howler monkeys, tribal drums, hyena laughter. Text scrolled across the bottom in red Comic Sans font. "Hide your daughters. The hoodie has arrived, coming soon to a jungle near you." Students started laughing. It began low like the start of a storm. One kid in the corner doubled over. Another slammed his hand on the desk, wheezing. Savannah's shoulders shook as she covered her mouth with both hands, pretending to hold back. Mrs. Rayburn stood frozen for a moment, stunned. Elijah. "What is this?" He turned toward her, disbelief etched across his face. "I didn't do this." More laughter. A boy in the front row imitated a monkey call. Ooh, ooh, ah, ah. That broke the dam. The room exploded. Elijah stood, slow, deliberate. His hands were shaking. His chest burned not from shame, but from the cold. From the kind of rage that builds when someone doesn't just insult you, they make you into a joke. Mrs. Rayburn finally snapped out of her daze and rushed toward the projector, yanking the HDMI cable from her laptop. The screen blinked to black. "Who did that?" she barked. "Who is responsible?" No one answered. No one looked up, just more. Giggles, whispers. Elijah gathered his things. Calmly, quietly. He didn't say a word. He just walked out. Elijah walked the hall like he wasn't bleeding. Each step down that pale corridor echoed louder than the last. His hoodie was up his jaw, locked tight. Not clenched in anger, but in discipline, in control. The kind of control you only learn when silence is your survival. The hallway was mostly empty, but he could still hear the laughter muffled through classroom walls, tucked into giggles as doors swung open. He wasn't stupid. He knew what would happen next by the time the lunch bell rang. Everyone in school would have seen the video. Teachers, students, coaches, maybe even the principal. But he also knew something else. No one would step forward. Not really because this wasn't a fire drill. This was the show, and he had been cast in it without permission. He ducked into the boys' restroom at the far end of the science wing, the one no one really used unless they were hiding. It smelled like bleach and old soap. Elijah locked the stall door and sat down on the toilet, not to use it, just to breathe. He pulled out his phone and opened Instagram. His name wasn't tagged, of course, but the hashtags were clear enough. Fairgrove threat, hoodie terror, blackout, the hallways, dozens of comments, hundreds of views. The video was everywhere. He clicked on the repost Savannah had liked. Top comment read, "Deadass thought he was about to blow up the vending machine." Second one, "Can someone tell him Halloween's over?" He closed the app. He didn't cry. He didn't punch the wall. He didn't scream. He just sat there. Hoodie pulled over his eyes, breathing. When the bell rang for fourth period, he didn't move. The stall felt safer than the classroom. Quieter, honest. There were no hidden cameras here, no edited memes, no muffled chuckles pretending to be coughing fits. Just Elijah and silence. His mother would be disappointed if she knew he was skipping class, but she'd be more hurt if she saw what the school had become, what they had made him into. He pulled out the crumpled flyer from his pocket, the one that had called him a threat, smoothed it out on his lap. The distorted image stared back at him. Not angry, not monstrous, just alone. He didn't move until a knock tapped the stall door. Elijah A. voice, soft, familiar. It was Marcus, one of the only other black students at Fairgrove Junior, wide receiver. Big smile that used to be wider before his cousin got pulled over last fall for driving aggressive while black. "You good, bro?" Elijah didn't answer right away. "Then I'm here," I figured. "Heard what happened." "Of course you did." Marcus was quiet for a second. "Then you coming out?" Elijah sighed. Looked down at the flyer again. Not sure. Another pause. Then the shuffle of shoes. "I'll be outside just in case the door opened." Closed silence returned, but now it didn't feel so empty. 20 minutes later, Elijah stepped out. He washed his hands, slowly stared at his reflection in the mirror. He didn't recognize his own eyes. They weren't tired. They weren't broken. They were still, steel still. He dried his hands, pulled the hoodie tight around his face, and walked toward the door. He didn't go back to class. He walked straight toward the cafeteria, and as expected, it was already buzzing. Tables were half filled with clusters of students, but the sound dipped when he entered. Eyes turned, heads swiveled. He scanned the room and saw it. The back table near the vending machines, his old spot. Someone was sitting in it. Savannah, legs crossed, phone in hand, surrounded by her crew. She looked up and met his gaze and smirked. The message was clear. I took your table, your place, your presence. He didn't flinch. He walked to the vending machine, bought a chocolate milk, and sat 3 tables away, still alone, but not hiding. Across the room, Savannah whispered something to her friend. They both laughed as the performance continued. But Elijah, he didn't give them the show they wanted. He drank his milk, ate his sandwich, then pulled out his notebook and started writing. The words came slow, heavy, but they came. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to disappear. The rest of the school day crawled by slow and watchful. Every hallway Elijah walked through felt like a stage. Every classroom doorway like a spotlight. The air was electric, not because anything new had happened, but because everyone was still waiting for his reaction. He gave them none. The fire they lit was roaring now, but he refused to fan it, and somehow that made them more uncomfortable than if he had exploded. By the time the final bell rang, even the teachers looked uncertain, eyes darting to him, then away, like they didn't know if they should offer comfort or distance. No one said a word. That was Fairgrove's talent, saying nothing while saying everything. At his locker, Elijah moved slowly. He stuffed his books into his backpack, zipped it halfway, then paused. Something was wedged between the pages of his literature textbook. He pulled it out, a handwritten note on ruled paper. At first, he expected more hate, another joke, another dagger wrapped in sarcasm, but instead it read, I saw what they did in class. I didn't laugh. I wanted to say something, but I didn't. I'm sorry for that. You didn't deserve any of it. There was no name, no signature beyond that single letter, but it was the first olive branch he'd seen all week. He folded the note carefully and tucked it into the front pocket of his hoodie. Not because it changed anything, but because it meant someone still saw him as human. The walk home felt longer than usual. The sun was already dipping low in the sky, casting golden streaks across the cracked pavement. Elijah pedaled his bike slowly, letting the wind cut through the noise in his head. The hoodie flapped slightly behind him, tugged by the breeze. He didn't mind. It felt like a cape now, not for flying but for shielding. At a red light, a car pulled up beside him, an old Ford pickup with mud on the tires and a cracked side mirror. He didn't look over until the driver honked once, sharp and short. Elijah turned his head, ready for anything. But inside the truck was Coach Daniels, grizzled white, mid-50s. He coached wrestling and history, like they were the same thing with bruises and dates. He didn't roll down the window. He just nodded once. A slow, steady nod. Elijah returned it. Then the light changed and they went their separate ways. That night, Elijah sat in the kitchen again. Same table, same hoodie, same dim glow of the overhead light. His mom was home asleep on the couch, TV still playing the evening news at low volume. Jordan had already crashed in the bedroom, snoring softly. He opened his notebook, not for homework, for something else. He flipped past the pages of class notes and half-finished essays and found a blank page. Then he started to write, I am not your joke. I am not your meme. I am not your teachable moment. I am a black boy in a hoodie, and I am not afraid of your silence anymore. The words came like breath, like blood, not for an audience, not for applause, for himself. When he finished, he tore the page out and folded it 3 times. Then he walked to the living room, grabbed a magnet off the fridge, and pinned the note to the front door. So in the morning before Jordan left for school, before his mom pulled on her scrubs before the day began, again they would see it, not because he needed them to say something, but because he wanted them to know he wasn't folding. Not now, not ever. And at the bottom of the note, in small, steady handwriting, he wrote one more line. They laughed today, but I'm still here and I still walking. By the time Monday rolled in, Elijah Carter had stopped checking his phone. The silence wasn't comfort anymore. It was suspense. Like the moment just before thunder, when you know the sky's about to split open, but can't tell which way the bolt will fall. The hallway glances had cooled, the reposts slowed, and the memes faded from the school's radar. But Elijah had grown up around storms. He knew when something was just waiting. And when he walked into the front office that morning, he knew it had arrived. He was only there to drop off a note. His mom had written it in neat cursive on lined paper, excusing his absence from Friday's fourth and fifth period. No details, no drama, just what was necessary. Like always, Ms. Aldridge, the secretary didn't say her usual good morning. She just gave him that thin-lipped stare, the kind people used when they'd already decided what kind of person you were. "I need to leave this for," he started. "Principal Langley would like to speak with you," she cut in. "Have a seat." Elijah blinked. "I just need to." She gave him a look, the kind that said, "This isn't a request." He sat. 10 minutes passed before Langley opened his door. The principal's office smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Mahogany bookshelves lined the wall, filled with untouched policy manuals and unopened awards. His desk sat too clean, too perfectly arranged. Langley was a tall, balding white man with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice trained in mediating disputes without ever choosing a side. His favorite phrase: "Let's be fair, but fair often meant safe for us, uncomfortable for you." "Elijah," he said, motioning to the chair. "Thanks for coming in. I wasn't really—" Elijah began. "I'll get right to it." Langley's hands folded in front of him, index fingers pressed together. "We received a report this morning from a student who says you made threatening comments over the weekend." Elijah's mouth went dry. "What student?" "Savannah Whitmore." Of course. Langley clicked something on his laptop and swiveled the screen toward Elijah. A screenshot appeared, white text on a dark background. "Just one line, hope you're ready. What happens next is on you." Time-stamped 9:13 p.m. Saturday. No name, no sender info. Just the message. "She says this was sent from your phone number." Langley said she and her mother filed a complaint this morning. They've also submitted a written statement and, well, given the recent tension, we're treating this very seriously. Elijah sat still. The world buzzed in his ears. "I didn't send that." Langley nodded like he was hearing him but not really listening. "And can you prove that?" The question landed like a slap. Elijah felt something rise in his chest. Not panic, not guilt. Something else, something quieter. He breathed through it. "I don't even have her number. I've never texted her." Ever. Langley sighed and tapped his fingers on the desk. These days, things can be screenshotted, forwarded. You know how fast things spread. It's hard to trace. But the allegation is there, and the perception, unfortunately, is powerful. Elijah's eyes narrowed. "So I'm guilty until proven innocent." "No one said that." "You don't have to." Langley leaned back in his chair. His voice softened. "Elijah, we're not suspending you at this point, but we are implementing administrative monitoring. You're not to speak to Savannah, text her, approach her, or engage in any way on or off campus." "Understood. What if she talks to me?" "Then you walk away." "And if I don't," Langley straightened again, "then we move to formal disciplinary action." It hit Elijah then, not just the accusation, but the strategy. This wasn't about justice. It was about containment, about keeping Savannah comfortable no matter what it cost him. "I want to see the original message," Elijah said. "You'll need your parent or guardian present for that." "No." He stood up slowly, eyes locked with Langley's. "You don't get to drag my mom into this. She's already working nights, trying to pay rent and keep food on the table." "Elijah, she doesn't have time to play defense for a school that's protecting a liar." Langley stiffened. "Watch your tone." But Elijah wasn't yelling. His voice never even rose. It stayed low, controlled, icy. "My tone's just fine. You just don't like the words." He turned and walked out. Didn't slam the door, didn't mutter under his breath, didn't crumble. He walked like someone who had just watched the rules change in real time and understood exactly what that meant. The hallway outside Langley's office was even quieter than before. It wasn't the hush of early morning or the soft silence of library hours. It was the heavy, suffocating kind, like the air right after lightning strikes, and you know the thunder is coming, but you don't know how loud. Elijah took a slow breath, squared his shoulders, and walked toward his locker. He could feel his pulse in his throat, feel the old tension building, the kind his mother had warned him about since he was old enough to walk home alone. The kind that told you, move carefully, eyes open, don't show the storm inside. His phone buzzed. He looked down, a new text. Block number. No name, not so tough, now are you? He deleted it, didn't bother to reply. The game was on a new level. By lunch, the whispers had changed their rhythm. No more giggles. No more. Did you see what Savannah posted? Now it was all undertones and darting eyes, as if everyone had been handed a script that said, Elijah's dangerous. A few students moved their bags closer when he passed. Teachers watched him longer than usual, glancing at each other after he walked by as if silently exchanging warnings. At the lunch line, he noticed Marcus, his friend from the bathroom the week before, waiting for him. Head down, face tight. Bro, Marcus murmured. What's going on? They saying you threatened Savannah. Elijah shook his head, voice low. I didn't say a damn thing to her. She made it up, sent a fake text or something. Marcus sighed. They're saying you told her she was gonna get what's coming. My homeroom teacher looked straight at me and said, you boys need to set a better example. I'm not even in her class, Elijah gave a bitter laugh. Guilt by association, always, Marcus said. Just keep your head up. Don't give them what they want. He took his lunch to the old table by the vending machines, his spot reclaimed. No one joined him. Savannah sat across the room surrounded by friends. Her laughter rang a little too loud, a little too forced. She looked over once, eyes cold, and smirked. He stared back, didn't blink. That was when the principal's voice crackled over the intercom. Elijah Carter, please report to the front office. Half the cafeteria turned to look at him. He kept his face blank, stood and walked slow, deliberate toward the office. Inside, Miss Aldridge didn't meet his gaze. She pointed silently to a chair outside Langley's office. He sat, waited. The clock on the wall ticked so loud it was almost violent. A moment later, his mom arrived, still in her blue scrubs, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, shoes squeaking as she walked. She must have left her shift at the hospital early, the cost of a single phone call from the principal's office. Langley ushered them both inside. Closed the door. Elijah, Mrs. Carter, thank you for coming. He began steepling his fingers. Elijah's mom nodded, but the set of her jaw was iron. Mrs. Carter, I'm afraid your son's been accused of making threats toward another student. Langley explained, showing her the printout of the screenshot. The written complaint. Elijah watched his mother's face as she read. At first confusion, then disbelief, then anger, a quiet, slow-burning flame. My son doesn't threaten people, she said, voice steady, especially not girls who start rumors about him. Where's the evidence? This message came from him. Langley shook his head. We're investigating, but you understand how serious this looks given the current climate. His mother leaned forward. You know what looks serious to me. The fact that this school has done nothing to protect my son from weeks of harassment, and now suddenly you're quick to believe he's the aggressor. You're not investigating. You're covering yourselves. Langley's lips pressed together. Elijah felt the pride rise in his chest, a little steadier now. When they left the office, Elijah's mom put a hand on his shoulder, squeezed once, and said quietly, Don't ever let them turn you into their villain, Elijah. We fight back with truth, not noise. I'll handle this. He nodded. The warmth of her hand steadied him. No matter how much the world tried to twist his story, there was someone in his corner who knew the truth. He walked back to class, chin higher, breath, slower, hoodie up. He would not play their villain. He would make them see the real story, no matter how many lies they told. The next day came with no warning but a new weapon. It was second period when it dropped. Elijah was sitting in biology, eyes half on the diagram of a cell on the whiteboard, half on the clock. He hadn't said a word all class, just sat there. Hoodie up, pencil in hand, scribbling notes like the day before. Hadn't happened. Then a soft ding echoed across the room, followed by another, and another. Phones lit up. Heads dipped. The rhythm was unmistakable. Something was spreading. Elijah's stomach tightened. He looked up and saw Savannah glance directly at him, then smile. Not like someone who won, like someone who pulled the trigger. At first, he didn't check his phone. He didn't need to. He could feel it. It took exactly 4 minutes before a kid in the back, white boy football, hoodie, smug face, burst into laughter. Loud, sharp, deliberate. The teacher tried to hush him, but the damage was already done. Another laugh. 2 more. By the time class ended, Elijah walked out the door to a hallway already buzzing. Marcus met him by the lockers. "You seen it yet?" Marcus asked, voice tight. Elijah shook his head. Marcus hesitated, then pulled out his phone and showed him. It was a video spliced together clips. A close-up of Elijah's face, low-lit, filtered to look darker, more threatening. Then shots of random news footage, riots, burning cars, headlines like inner-city violence, surging, overlaid in block red letters. "Meet Elijah Carter, our future school shooter." Beneath it, a caption he's been watching. Waiting, wearing that hoodie like a mask, just a matter of time. Fairgrove, stay safe. There was no account listed. It was posted from a burner profile. No traceable name, just anonymous. But it didn't matter, it was everywhere now. In the lunchroom, people moved away when he walked in. He saw a teacher glance at him, then subtly shift their stance closer to the security guard by the vending machines. Whispers followed him like smoke. He grabbed a sandwich and sat at his table. Alone again. He wasn't hungry, he didn't unwrap the food, just sat still. Waiting. The principal didn't call him in this time. It was the police. 2 officers arrived during 4th period. The intercom didn't even call him. A student aide came to the door, whispered something to the teacher, and Elijah was told to pack up and follow them. Down the hall, past classrooms where students turned to watch through the glass. At the front office, 2 uniformed officers stood waiting. One tall and thin, the other wide and pale with a hand resting on his belt. Elijah Carter, the tall one, asked, "Yes, we need to ask you some questions. Please come with us." They didn't cuff him, but they made sure everyone saw him leave. Inside the conference room, they sat across from him. Notebooks out. "We've received reports of threatening behavior, including a video that's circulating online." "I didn't make it," Elijah said calmly. "Do you know who did know? Have you ever said anything to Savannah Whitmore that could be interpreted as violent?" No, they pressed, asked about social media, about group chats, about the fake text, about the meme from weeks ago, about whether he'd ever owned a weapon. He answered each question with the same steady voice, "No, no, no." After 20 minutes, they let him go. No charges, no arrest. But they didn't apologize either. They just said, "We'll be following up," and left. That night, Elijah sat at the kitchen table again. Lights off, hoodie still on, a copy of The Hate You Give lay open beside him unread. His mother stood in the doorway, silent. "Watching, you want to transfer schools?" she finally asked. He didn't answer at first, then shook his head. "No. Why not?" "Because they're trying to push me out," he said. "And if I leave, I'm letting them win." She stepped closer, placed her hand on his shoulder. "You staying means we fight smarter. No more playing defense." He nodded. She kissed the top of his head. "Let them come," Elijah said softly. "Let them lie. Let them twist." They crossed a line today. He looked up at her, eyes sharp, no fear left. "Now it's my turn." When the call came, Nathaniel Carter was already awake. He hadn't slept much in years, not since Kandahar, not since the night a mortar shell turned half his platoon into shadows. Sleep was a luxury in his world. Awareness was armor. So when his phone buzzed just past 4:00 a.m., he was already sitting at the kitchen table in a modest home, 2 towns over, sipping black coffee and reviewing agency reports on interstate threats. It was habit now, survival in suit and tie. He picked up after the first ring. "Dad," Elijah's voice cracked raw with something more dangerous than anger restraint. Nathaniel stood without another word. By 6:30 a.m., he was parked in front of Fairgrove High. Not in a black SUV, not with sirens or flash, just a dark gray Lincoln, clean, quiet, and paid in full. He stepped out in a pressed navy suit, polished Oxfords, a silver tie bar glinting beneath a charcoal trench. No one looked twice. At first, Nathaniel Carter didn't walk like a visitor. He walked like a decision. In the front office, Miss Aldridge looked up from her desk impaled. "Can I help you? I'm here to speak with Walter Langley." Now her eyes widened. "Do you have an appointment? I don't need one." His voice was calm, measured, but carried the weight of classified clearance. She hesitated, then buzzed the line. Langley's voice crackled through. "Yes, there's a Mr. Carter here to see you. Elijah's father." A long pause. "Send him in." Langley stood as Nathaniel entered, but the older man didn't offer his hand. He closed the door behind him, unbuttoned his coat, and took a seat across the desk. Mr. Carter, Langley began, his usual placid tone slipping. "I can assure you we're taking these events very seriously." Nathaniel said nothing. Langley cleared his throat. "I understand your son has gone through a series of unfortunate experiences." Nathaniel leaned forward slightly. Unfortunate. Langley shifted in his chair. "We're doing everything we can to maintain a safe environment for all students. Allegations were made. We followed protocol. No action has been taken against Elijah directly. You called the police on my son," Nathaniel interrupted. Langley froze. "I read the officer's report. I read the complaint. I read the fake text message and the anonymous video posted from a VPN out of Idaho. I read it all at 4:32 this morning." Langley blinked. "How did you? I'm a federal investigator for the Department of Homeland Security." Nathaniel set his voice flat. "I deal with cyber threat analysis, school infiltration, risk, and racial extremism. My clearance is higher than yours. So let's stop pretending you're in charge here." Langley opened his mouth, then closed it. Nathaniel continued. "What you've done, your failure to act when my son was harassed, smeared, dehumanized, is negligence at best, complicity at worst." He placed a manila folder on the desk. "In here, you'll find logs of every online post, every violation of FERPA privacy law related to school systems leaking his image, every instance your staff ignored a hate incident." Langley's hand stayed frozen on the desk. Nathaniel leaned in closer. "If this school doesn't issue a full public apology, remove the false disciplinary warning from Elijah's record, and begin cultural competency training for all staff and students within 30 days. He paused. "I'll file a federal complaint. You'll be investigated for administrative misconduct, civil rights violations, and the school board will have to answer for why a black student in a hoodie was treated like a terrorist, while the white student who incited the campaign walks free." Langley's voice was barely a whisper. "You're threatening me." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "No, principal, I'm informing you." 10 minutes later, Nathaniel walked out of the office without another word. The secretary stood stunned. A guidance counselor peeked around the corner, whispering to someone behind her. Elijah stood at the end of the hallway, still silent. Wearing the same blue hoodie, Nathaniel approached and stopped in front of him. Neither spoke for a moment. Then Elijah said, voice low, "They tried to break me." "Dad?" Nathaniel looked him in the eyes, strong, proud. "I know," he said, "and they failed." He placed a firm hand on Elijah's shoulder. "Now we go on offense." The next 48 hours were different. It wasn't just the silence in the halls, though. That was new. Or the way teachers stopped Elijah after class to ask if he needed anything. Their voices suddenly soft or measured, like they just learned his name carried weight. It wasn't even how Savannah stopped posting entirely. Her usual digital noise suddenly vanished. No, the difference was in the air. Something had shifted. It wasn't fear exactly. It was realization. They thought Elijah was the problem, but now they were learning Elijah had a shadow, and his name was Nathaniel Carter. The news came through the school app first. A bland official message posted by the administration of Fairgrove High is committed to the emotional safety of all students. In response to recent events, we will be partnering with the Department of Education's Civil Rights Office to conduct a review of our bias response systems. No names, no details, but everyone knew who it was about. By lunchtime, Elijah couldn't take 5 steps without someone turning their head. Some avoided his eyes completely. Some nodded stiff and unsure. One teacher actually apologized, her face flushed, voice trembling, before rushing away like she just handed in late homework. But Elijah, he didn't say much. He just kept walking. Head up, shoulders straight, hoodie on. At home, Nathaniel was already 2 steps ahead. The Carter dining room had turned into a legal war room. Documents, printouts, laptops. A printer humming in the corner like a quiet drum of justice. I'm submitting an official statement to the school board, he told Elijah and his mom that evening. And the ACLU is already reviewing your case. We may not even need to go to court, but we will if we have to. His mom looked up from the table, weary but steadied by Nathaniel's presence. You think they'll listen now, she asked. Nathaniel nodded once. They'll have to. Elijah sat quietly listening. He'd never seen his father like this. Not angry, not loud, just controlled. Like every word was a bullet in the chamber. They want you to be invisible, son, Nathaniel said, finally turning to him. They're comfortable with black boys who shrink, who apologize, who disappear. Then he leaned forward, his voice sharp as a blade. But you stood tall. You didn't give them what they wanted, and now, he smiled small, calculated they don't know what to do with that. The following morning, something remarkable happened. Elijah was walking to his locker, usual hoodie up, when Marcus fell in step beside him. You good? Marcus asked, voice low. Elijah nodded, but then another classmate joined them. Terrence, a sophomore from the track team, who never said more than 2 words before. Then Maya, one of the only other black girls in school. Then 2 more. By the time Elijah reached his locker, 5 students had silently joined him like armor. No signs. No chance, just presence. That's when Savannah walked by. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her smirk was gone. Her posture different, a tension in her jaw that hadn't been there before. Because the thing about power was, it only worked when the other person didn't know they had any. Elijah knew now. And worse for her, so did everyone else. That afternoon, during 6th period, Elijah was called into Langley's office again. This time the mood was different. Langley stood to greet him. No smile, but no smugness either. There was a district administrator in the room too. Miss Quintero, dark suit, sharp eyes, and a notepad that never stopped moving. We wanted to follow up, Langley said, voice carefully neutral. To make sure you're feeling supported. Elijah didn't answer right away. Just looked around the office, the same one where he'd been treated like a criminal a few days earlier. Then he said, support would have looked different last week. Langley swallowed hard. Ms. Quintero scribbled something fast. Well, Langley said the school is launching a review. As you may know, your father has submitted several formal complaints, and we take them very seriously. Elijah folded his arms. I'm not here to make noise, he said quietly. I just want to be treated like I belong here, like I'm not a threat because of how I dress or how I look. Quintero looked up, met his eyes, spoken like someone who should be running this place. She said. Langley smiled thinly. Elijah didn't. He just stood up and walked out. Friday morning arrived like a quiet drum beat beneath the town's skin. No sirens, no statements, no rallies, but something had shifted and everyone could feel it. Fairgrove wasn't used to reckoning. It preferred whispers over confrontation, policies over people, and apologies written in passive voice. But this week, it met something it didn't know how to smother: a black boy in a hoodie who refused to break, and a father who'd been trained by the federal government not to blink. The first real fallout landed during second period, an announcement over the loudspeaker: Langley's voice. Teachers, please check your email immediately. All staff are requested to report to a mandatory after-school meeting regarding district compliance and student equity protocols. The classroom froze. Students exchanged glances. Even the teacher, Mr. Templeton, usually unbothered by everything except his missing whiteboard markers, looked up surprised. No one said Elijah's name, but everyone knew. Weaver. Later that day, Savannah was called to the counselor's office. She didn't return for the rest of the afternoon. No one knew what was said, no one asked, but the tone had changed. Where once there was mocking, now there was avoidance. Where once there was giggling, now there was guilt. Some students began untagging themselves from the video posts. A few deleted their Instagram stories from the week before. Even the Fairgrove Tea account mysteriously vanished overnight. No one claimed responsibility, but one thing was clear: the narrative was no longer theirs to control. That evening, Elijah and his father sat side by side on the back porch. No laptops, no files, just two folding chairs, a glass of sweet tea, and the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. Crickets sang in the grass. The air smelled like wood and spring. "You did good," Nathaniel said, finally breaking the quiet. Elijah didn't respond right away. "Then I didn't win." "No," his father agreed, "but you didn't lose either." He looked at his son, eyes sharp but soft. "You made them see you." "On your terms." Elijah looked down at his hands, scarless but not untouched. They felt different now. Not harder, just realer. "Was it like this for you," he asked, "when you came home in uniform and they still crossed the street when they saw you?" Nathaniel exhaled long and slow. "It's always been like this, son. The uniform doesn't shield you. Neither does the degree, or the church tie, or the perfect smile. What does?" He tapped his temple. "Then his chest is knowing who you are. And not letting them change that." Elijah nodded, took a sip of tea. The silence returned, but this time it felt full, like a calm before something bigger. Not a storm, a rising. On Monday, students arrived at Fairgrove High to find something new on the bulletin board near the cafeteria. A large photo printed on glossy paper: Elijah Carter hoodie on eyes forward. Walking down the hallway, below it in bold black letters: "This is what strength looks like." There was no signature, no logo, just the image. And the truth: no one tore it down. After school, Elijah walked past that photo on his way to his bike. A group of juniors paused beside it, quiet. One of them turned to him and nodded. "Respect, man." Another said, "My little brother asked about you. Said you looked like a superhero." Elijah didn't say anything, just smiled. Not wide, just enough. When he reached the end of the block, he saw a familiar figure leaning against the hood of the Lincoln Nathaniel. He held up a small object, a folded piece of blue fabric. "Brand new, I figured," Nathaniel said, tossing it over. "Might need a fresh one." Elijah caught it. Another hoodie. He opened it slowly. Same size, same shade. But stitched on the inside hem was a patch. A single word: unbreakable. He pulled it on, let the hood fall just enough to shadow his face, then got on his bike and rode not away forward. Savannah Whitmore didn't notice it at first. It was subtle, the way people started responding with short nods instead of smiles. The way group chats went quiet when she sent a meme. Even the way her best friend Lila didn't laugh as hard when Savannah made a joke during homeroom. It all felt off, like she was still the center of attention, but in the way a collapsing star is glowing sure but doomed. By the end of the week, she could feel the shift, and it terrified her. Monday morning, she stepped into Fairgrove High with her usual confidence. Hair in perfect curls, expensive perfume, designer boots that clicked down the tiled hallway like punctuation, but people didn't part for her anymore. They watched whispers followed her, not the usual envy-fueled buzz, but something darker. And when she passed Elijah's locker and he didn't look her way, she almost stumbled. He didn't flinch, didn't smirk, just existed calm and steady like gravity. She wasn't used to being ignored, especially by the person she tried so hard to break. It wasn't long before she got called to the office. Mrs. Carlisle, the school counselor, didn't greet her with the usual sugar in her voice. She simply gestured to the chair as said. Savannah blinked. Is something wrong? I think you already know. Carlisle dropped a thick folder onto the desk. Dozens of printed screenshots, captured posts, recovered messages, logs from the now deleted Our Fairgrove T Instagram account. Someone had tracked everything. Even traced the anonymous uploads back to a local Wi-Fi IP address, registered under Whitmore residence. I didn't post these, Savannah said quickly. Your phone did, Carlisle replied. Savannah's mouth went dry. We know Elijah didn't send the threatening message you reported. His carrier confirmed it. The timestamp on the fake screenshot you gave us edited. The metadata proves it. You altered the image using an online editor. Savannah, now her hands started shaking. You need to understand the severity of what you've done. Carlisle continued, voice calm but surgical. You falsely accused another student of being violent. You incited racial harassment, and you tried to cover your tracks. Savannah tried to breathe. I was just joking. It got out of control. No, Carlisle said, her voice cold now. You tried to destroy someone's life because you didn't like how he stood up to you in the produce aisle. I didn't mean you meant every word, Carlisle snapped. And now there are consequences. The official school response came later that day. An all-staff email went out at 3:17 p.m. Effective immediately, Savannah Whitmore has been placed on a 2-week academic suspension pending further investigation regarding violations of the Student Code of Conduct and potential federal civil rights infractions. The hallway conversations turned instantly. She's suspended. Wait, she really faked it. I thought her dad was like untouchable. Even her most loyal followers went quiet. No texts, no comments, no sympathy. She went from queen to pariah in a single afternoon. Her home wasn't any safer. Her father, Councilman Whitmore, slammed the front door when he returned that evening. You had one job, he barked, stay out of trouble. How do you think this looks? Her mother sat stone-faced on the couch phone, in hand reading local news blurbs and anonymous Reddit threads already tearing into the Whitmore name. Savannah tried to defend herself, but the words felt small now. Childish, I was just angry. He humiliated me. Her father stared her down. No, he told the truth, and you couldn't handle it. The weight of her own lies finally began to settle in her chest. Meanwhile, across town, Elijah sat on the back steps of his apartment, watching the sun melt behind the trees, hoodie on, head clear. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I'm sorry, he didn't reply. He just stared at the screen for a moment, then locked it and slipped it into his pocket. Some apologies don't deserve answers. The fall of Savannah wasn't dramatic. No viral videos, no tearful public confession. It was quieter than that, but that's what made it real. She was learning day by day that character is louder than charisma, and that power borrowed from privilege is never truly yours to keep. And Elijah, he was still walking, head up, hoodie on. On Wednesday, Savannah stayed home. She didn't post, didn't check her phone, didn't eat. The girl who once controlled entire friend groups with a well-timed glare now sat in her designer pajamas, curled on the couch, muted beneath the weight of her own silence. Outside, the town kept spinning. Fairgrove was quick to forgive the powerful, but this time the stain stuck because for once the victim hadn't vanished. He had stood tall and the world had watched. Meanwhile, Fairgrove High moved on without her. The halls buzzed with a new kind of tension, but it wasn't hostile. It was like the school had collectively realized something. The lines between cruelty and comedy had been blurred for too long, and Elijah's stand had brought everything into sharp focus. In third period, someone raised their hand to ask why To Kill a Mockingbird was still taught without ever discussing racial trauma. In sixth period, a group of seniors asked the principal if they could start a black student union. And in the cafeteria, Elijah wasn't sitting alone anymore. The shift started small. Marcus sat with him first, quiet like always. They didn't talk about Savannah or memes or the false police report. They just shared a lunch table again, like they used to in middle school before silence became safer. Then came Jamila and Zoe. Then a freshman named Noah, skinny, nervous glasses too big for his face, who said, "You mind if I sit here?" Elijah looked up and smiled. "Nah, go ahead." By Friday, their table wasn't just full, it was surrounded. A space once marked by loneliness had become a circle of presence. Not loud, not flashy, just rooted. Outside of school, things got even louder. The local paper ran a headline, "Black Student Targeted in Hoax Threat Father's Federal Response Forces Policy Shift." Elijah's name was protected, but people still knew the article quoted anonymous students referenced administrative failure and included a note that an official complaint had been submitted to the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. The Whitmores didn't issue a statement. Councilman Whitmore declined all interviews. His campaign page went offline for 3 days, but Nathaniel, he wasn't finished. On Friday evening, he stood before the school board during a public session. Elijah sat in the back row with his mom, hoodie down, but his presence unmistakable. The auditorium was half full. Teachers, parents, students, a few local reporters scribbled notes. Nathaniel stepped to the microphone and unfolded a single piece of paper. His voice was calm, not rehearsed, deliberate. "My name is Nathaniel Carter. I served this country for 22 years. Retired as a colonel. My son has endured harassment, humiliation, and false criminal accusation. Not for what he did, but for who he is. And you allowed it." He scanned the room. No one looked him in the eye. In any other school, in any other town, Savannah Whitmore's behavior would have been called what it is: malicious and dangerous. But here it was protected because her family holds influence, because whiteness here still comes with immunity. A few gasps, a few murmurs. Nathaniel continued, "But the world is watching now. This is bigger than Fairgrove. This is about every black student who's been made to feel like a threat before they've even spoken. Every hoodie mistaken for a weapon. Every calm voice treated like a provocation." He paused, looked toward Elijah, then back to the board. "I don't want vengeance. I want change, starting here." Then he stepped away and the room finally applauded. That night, Elijah walked home with his hoodie half-zipped, wind brushing gently against his skin. The stars were bright over Fairgrove, and for the first time in a long time, he looked up and let himself believe something was cracking. Not him, them. Savannah returned to school the following Monday. Her suspension was over. Her slate was far from clean. She walked through the double doors of Fairgrove High, wearing oversized sunglasses and a beige hoodie that looked like it had never been worn before. The hallway didn't go quiet. It didn't gasp. It just moved around her like water avoiding a stone. The whispers that once swirled in her wake had turned into avoidance. People didn't stare anymore, they dismissed. Her throne had been taken apart piece by piece, not with rage but with indifference. And that perhaps was the most painful cut of all. At lunch, she approached her old table. Lila was there scrolling on her phone earbuds, and when Savannah sat down, Lila gave her a single glance and returned to her screen. Savannah waited. No one spoke to her. No one laughed. And across the room, Elijah's table was full again. Diverse, open, alive. There was no performance, just presence. He didn't even look in her direction. She noticed that was enough. In the days that followed, more changes came. The school's first open town hall was announced, hosted in the gymnasium. The theme: community, race, and accountability. Where do we go from here? The flyer had no school logo. It had Elijah's words printed across the top in clean, bold font. I'm not your joke. I'm not your fear. I'm your reflection. People showed up, more than anyone expected. Parents, students, alumni, even some city officials. Elijah didn't speak at the event, not directly, but his poem was read aloud by Miss Dunleavy, his English teacher. Her voice broke near the end. She wiped her glasses, finished the last lines, and the room stood in applause. Savannah's father was not present. A week later, a formal letter arrived at the Carter home. It was signed by the superintendent on behalf of the Fairgrove School District. I want to extend a sincere apology to Elijah Carter and his family. We failed you. We acknowledge the harm caused both by students and our own administrative inaction. You deserve better. It wasn't a settlement, it wasn't even enough, but it was a beginning. Nathaniel folded the letter in half, placed it in a binder labeled Civil Action Fairgrove, and said, "We'll keep it, but we won't stop here." On a sunny Thursday, Elijah was asked to stay after school. The assistant principal met him by the gym doors, clipboard in hand. "We're installing a new mural," she said. "We'd like you to help unveil it." Elijah blinked. "Me?" She smiled. "You." That afternoon, a sheet was pulled from the far wall near the front entrance. Underneath a painting, it showed a silhouette, broad-shouldered hoodie, upstanding on the steps of the school, hands in pockets. Face half-shadowed but eyes clear. The words above the figure read, "Strength is silent until it speaks. Justice is invisible until it stands up." And in small font below, "Inspired by Elijah Carter." The school clapped, a few cheered. Elijah said nothing. He just looked at it, really looked, and nodded once. That night he walked home under a sky smeared with gold and lavender. Hoodie loose around his shoulders, breath steady. He passed the grocery store where it all began. Inside, oranges were stacked neatly again. He went in, bought a bag. No one followed him. No one flinched. The woman from the first day, Miss Aggie, wasn't there anymore. Rumor had it her daughter moved her to a facility in another county. Some things fade, some things get replaced, but some truths stay. When Elijah got home, he placed the bag of oranges on the counter. Jordan looked up from the couch and grinned. "You got the good ones." Elijah smiled. "Only the best." He poured some into a bowl, turned on the lamp beside the window, and sat back. Same hoodie, same kid. But everything had changed. For the first time in months, Elijah Carter sat in class without looking over his shoulder. The sun slanted through the classroom blinds, casting long golden lines across the desk. And for once, no one was staring at him like he didn't belong there. Not as a curiosity, not as a warning sign, just as a student. A boy with his hoodie down and his head up. Templeton was teaching of mice and men, and Elijah found himself following every word. Not because the story was new, but because he understood something deeper now: how people see what they want, fear what they don't, and destroy what they never try to understand. He thought of Lenny. He thought of himself. And then he closed the book. After class, Marcus caught up with him by the lockers. "You doing okay?" he asked Elijah. Nodded. "Yeah, better." They walked together to the cafeteria where things had changed in small but powerful ways. A new poster on the wall read, "Fairgrove belongs to all of us." Underneath it, a row of student signatures: Black, white, Latino, Asian, mixed, real names, real people. It wasn't perfect. Some students still kept their distance. Some teachers still had that look, the one that said, "I'm not sure where I stand." But others had stepped up, others had learned, a few had apologized, and more had simply started listening. That was enough for now. In the lunchroom, Elijah found his usual spot already half filled. Jamila slid over, making room for him, and Zoe passed him a chocolate milk without a word. He smiled. It wasn't loud, it wasn't victorious, it was quiet. Earned, Marcus leaned in, voice low. "You hear about Miss Quintero's idea. What idea? She wants to start a leadership panel. Students from different backgrounds, race, gender, orientation. She's asking if you'd lead it." Elijah blinked. "Me, yeah. You, you've already been leading, bro, just didn't have a name for it." Elijah looked down at his tray. He wasn't sure if he wanted that responsibility, wasn't sure if people would follow him or just watch and wait, but something in his chest shifted. A voice not loud but steady. "You already stood up when it was hardest." He didn't say yes. Not yet, but he didn't say no. After school, Ms. Dunleavy called him aside. She handed him a letter. "This came through the district's community writing contest. You submitted something a while back, didn't you?" He opened it. Read slowly. "Congratulations. Your piece, Invisible Until I Spoke, has been selected as a finalist for statewide recognition." Below it, details for a public reading in Columbus, an invitation to speak, to share his words out loud. He felt a flicker of something new. Not pride, readiness. That night, Elijah stood at his bedroom window, looking out at Fairgrove, lit by porch lights and early stars. His hoodie hung on the chair behind him, creased and worn, a little faded at the seams. Jordan came in, dragging a blanket. "Can I crash here tonight?" Elijah didn't ask why. He just nodded. Jordan curled up on the bed, mumbling through sleep. "You're like famous or something." Now Elijah chuckled. "Nah, just loud enough to be heard." "Can I be like you when I grow up?" Elijah turned off the lamp. "You already are." Outside, the night pressed gently against the windows. Inside, Elijah closed his eyes and let himself rest. Not to forget what happened, but to gather strength for what comes next. Because the lesson wasn't just for Fairgrove, it was for everyone who ever walked into a room and felt the heat of eyes that didn't see them. It was for every black kid in every hoodie who'd been told to shrink, to hush, to disappear. It was for the ones still learning that silence isn't surrender and that dignity doesn't require permission. The auditorium smelled like old carpet and nerves. It was Friday night in Columbus, and Elijah stood backstage gripping a folded piece of paper, his palms damp despite the cool air. The State Youth Voices event had drawn a crowd, educators, activists, students, and parents from all over Ohio. A few judges, a couple news cameras. He wasn't used to this kind of light. He wasn't used to being seen because of his voice, not his silence, his hoodie, or someone else's lie. Just his words. Ms. Dunleavy caught his eye from the front row and gave him a small nod. He stepped up to the mic. "Good evening," Elijah began. His voice was even, clear, not rehearsed, but remembered. "My name is Elijah Carter. I'm 16. I live in Fairgrove." "You've probably never heard of it." A few chuckles. "That's okay. I used to feel the same way about myself." The room stilled. "I used to think I didn't matter because I was quiet, that the only way to survive was to make myself smaller, talk less, blend in. I thought if I kept my hoodie up, kept my head down, the world would pass me by without pressing me flat." He unfolded the paper. "But I learned something this year, something I want to leave with you." He took a breath, then read, "I am not your threat. I am not your punchline. I am not your exception or your statistic. I'm a boy in a hoodie with hands in his pockets, not because I'm hiding something, but because the world keeps trying to take what I carry. I walk softly so your fear doesn't echo. I speak clearly so your silence doesn't win. I stand still because sometimes stillness is louder than rage, and I will keep walking, not away from who I am, but toward everything you tried to keep from me." He looked up, and to every black kid out there, wear your hoodie not as armor, not as a disguise, but as truth. The crowd rose in a wave of applause. Not thunderous, not explosive. Intentional, miss. Quintero wiped a tear. Elijah stepped down and returned to his seat. The boy next to him, a student from Dayton, bumped his shoulder and whispered, "Yo, you lit that stage on fire." Elijah smiled. Not from pride, from peace. Back at school the following week, the poem had made its rounds. It was printed in the school newspaper, shared in morning announcements, posted in classrooms, not because the administration wanted a show, but because students demanded it. During an open discussion circle in the library, a white student, Jason from the baseball team, raised his hand. "I used to think racism was just something that happened in the South, or like back in the day," he said, voice cracking a little. "But then I saw what they did to Elijah and realized, maybe we've all been part of the silence." No one laughed. A girl in the corner murmured, "Facts," another added, "I didn't speak up either, and that's on me." And Elijah, he didn't scold, he nodded. Owning it is the first step, then you move forward. Later, he sat with Marcus beneath the old oak tree behind the football field. "You gonna do it?" Marcus asked. "The leadership panel." "Yeah, they want to call it the Carter Initiative." Elijah shook his head. "Too much. Let's just call it the circle." Marcus grinned. "I like that." They watched the clouds drift above them. "You think this lasts?" Marcus asked. "The change." Elijah didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, same hands that once shook when a classroom laughed, same hands that wrote the poem, same hands that refused to push back, not because they couldn't, but because they chose not to. Then he said, "It'll last if we keep showing up. Not just when it's loud, but when it's quiet too." The air inside the gym was warm and thick with breath and silence. Not the kind of silence that makes you nervous, the kind that tells you something true is about to be said. Elijah stood at the podium, steady dressed like himself. No suit, no tie. Just jeans, sneakers, and the same blue hoodie he wore the day the world tried to unmake him. Now it was his turn to speak again. "I want to tell you a story." He began, a voice, steady eyes scanning the room. The room hushed, not a whisper, not a shuffle, just attention. It starts the same way a lot of ours do. You walk into a space that wasn't made for you, but you're told to smile and be grateful for being let in. A few heads nodded quietly, cautiously. You're not loud, not disrespectful, you just exist. But somehow that's still too much. He paused, looked at the students in the back, the freshmen, the quiet kids, the ones whose hoodies weren't a fashion choice, but a form of protection. You're called angry when you're serious, threatening when you're still. You learn early that people aren't afraid of what you do. They're afraid of who they think you are. A soft, dry laugh came from somewhere in the bleachers, the kind that says, "Been there." Elijah continued, "I was taught to make myself small, not by my parents, but by the world. Keep your voice down, keep your head down, keep your hoodie down." His hands reached up, almost on instinct, touched the hood resting on his shoulders. And for a while I believed that's how you stay safe. But silence didn't keep me safe. It kept me invisible. And it almost made me forget who I was. He paused, letting the words settle like dust after a long windstorm. But something changed. Someone called me a threat. Someone tried to bury me under a lie. And I realized if people are going to look at you anyway, you might as well let them see the truth. He unfolded a sheet of paper and read, "I am not your fear. I am not your lesson to learn too late. I am not the villain of your imagination. I am the voice you tried to silence, still speaking. The story you tried to erase, still being written. The shadow you cast, stepping into the light, and I won't disappear again." He folded the paper. Silence again. Then applause. Slow. Then growing, not performative, not forced, just earned. After the assembly, Elijah walked the hall like he'd never walked it before. He passed the same lockers where people once left notes calling him names, past the classroom where Savannah once tossed a paper ball at his head, past the vending machine where he used to eat alone. And when he reached the back doors of the school, someone tapped his shoulder. It was a seventh grader, short, skinny, with deep brown eyes and a blue hoodie, far too big for his frame. "Hey," the boy said. "I liked what you said," Elijah smiled. "Thanks, I wear my hoodie all the time, too. People think I'm weird." Elijah crouched down a little. "You're not weird. You're just early." "Early? Yeah, you're being you before they're ready." The kid grinned. Elijah stood and held out his fist. They bumped knuckles, no words needed. And then the boy walked off, head a little higher. That night Elijah sat on the front steps of his apartment, hoodie on stars above. His mom sat beside him, arms crossed against the cool air. "You were good today," she said. "Like real good?" He shrugged. "I just told the truth." She smiled. "Well, the truth hit different when it's said with your chest." He laughed, then she nudged him. "So what's next, Mr. Spoken Word?" "I don't know," he said, looking out at the quiet street. "But whatever it is, I won't be quiet about it." She nodded, then leaned her head on his shoulder. In the stillness of the moment, Elijah realized something. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building something louder, something lasting. A story no one could write for him, a story that would outlive the lies. The sky was still half asleep when Elijah stepped out onto the front porch. The kind of morning that wrapped everything in a gray-blue hush. No dogs barking, no engines revving, just the creak of wood beneath his sneakers and the distant rustle of trees caught in a lazy breeze. He took a breath. The air tasted like spring, cool, but soft like forgiveness. He zipped his hoodie halfway. Same one as always. The one with the tear along the left wrist, the threadbare elbow, and the memory of too many heavy days stitched into every seam. But today it didn't feel heavy. It felt like skin. He wheeled his bike down the steps, careful not to wake Jordan, who was still sprawled across the couch inside one sock, halfway off TV remote, still in his hand from the night before. He smiled, then pushed off into the street. Fairgrove looked different at 6:30 a.m. The town hadn't put on its face yet. The sidewalks were still honest. The store windows hadn't been wiped down, and the sun was just beginning to think about showing up. As he rode, Elijah passed old familiar places, the laundromat with the broken vending machine, the basketball court where he once crossed over 3 dudes in one game and still didn't get picked the next day. The corner bodega where the cashier always watched him a little too closely until last week, when she nodded first. Little shifts, small signs like the town was learning how to blink. He stopped at Myers Market, just stood there for a second. No crowd, no security guard, just him, the sliding doors, and the ghost of who he used to be. He didn't go inside. Not because he was afraid, because he didn't need to. The victory had never been about proving anything to the store. It was about proving something to himself, that he could walk into a storm and still come out dry, that he could be called a threat, a liar, a joke, and not fold, that he could speak without screaming, stand without swinging, and that somehow silence, when chosen, could be louder than rage. He continued riding past the school gates. The mural was still there, a full-body image now thanks to the senior art class. It showed a young black teen in a hoodie, not smiling, not angry, just present. Underneath the words, "You don't have to be loud to be heard. You just have to stay standing." He paused, stepped off the bike, walked up to the wall and rested a hand against the painted shoulder. It felt cold, but inside something warm began to rise. "Early ride." The voice behind him made him turn. It was Ms. Quintero, dressed in black slacks and a windbreaker, balancing a coffee in one hand and a clipboard in the other. "Yeah," Elijah replied. Just needed some air. She looked at the mural, then at him. You know we've got orientation next week, new students. A lot of them are scared. First time in a school like this. He waited. They'll need someone who knows how to walk halls like these, she said. Someone who didn't just survive it, but helped change it. You want me to talk to them? He asked. She smiled. I want you to lead them. That evening, Elijah sat on the steps again, notebook open on his lap. His mom was inside cooking. Jordan was finishing homework loudly. The streetlight buzzed above him like a fly stuck in time. He wrote, Day 1, I was invisible. Day 5, I was laughed at. Day 12, I was feared. Day 19, I was framed. Day 26, I stood day 42. They listened. Day 58, I walked in without shrinking. Day 60, a kid in a hoodie asked to sit beside me. He smiled. Day 61, I'm still here. Then he closed the notebook, tucked it under his arm, and watched as Jordan stepped out to join him. The little boy wore his old hoodie too big, sleeves flopping. You cold? Elijah asked. Jordan shook his head. Nah, just wanted to look like you. And so they sat. Two black boys in hoodies, not symbols, not headlines, just brothers, breathing, belonging, still walking. The next Monday, the school gym buzzed with nervous energy. Orientation day, new faces shuffled and some shy, some wide-eyed, some already practicing the art of invisibility. Backpacks hugged tight, hoodies pulled low, voices low enough to vanish. Elijah stood at the front with Miss Quintero, hands in his pockets, heartbeat steady. You ready? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Then they don't need a speech. She raised an eyebrow. They need a mirror. So he didn't give a lecture, didn't quote statistics or list what not to do. Instead, he walked down into the crowd and sat cross-legged in the center of the gym floor. I'm Elijah, he said simply. You don't need to know anything else. A few chuckles, a few glances exchanged, but they listened. I've been called a threat, a liar, a mistake, all while doing nothing but walking through the world in this hoodie. He paused, lifted the edge of the fabric slightly. This doesn't make me dangerous, it just makes you notice me. He looked around. You'll be noticed too, sometimes in the wrong way, but that doesn't mean you stop walking. Afterward, a dozen kids stayed behind to talk. One girl from the South Side told him I thought I was the only one who kept my hood up so people wouldn't see how scared I was. Elijah smiled. You're not scared, you're learning to carry weight. A boy with dreads asked, what if they already decided who I am? Elijah shrugged. Then prove them right, if what they see is strength. That day, he didn't change anyone's life. But he opened a door. The week rolled on. The school felt lighter somehow. More eyes held compassion. More voices spoke carefully. More teachers started staying 5 minutes longer after class just to listen. And Elijah. He became something more than a survivor. He became reference. The hoodie was no longer a conversation starter. It was a signature. Freshmen wore theirs in quiet defiance. Teachers stopped asking students to remove them in class, and on Fridays, a group of juniors launched Hoodie Day, not for style, but for solidarity. No slogans, no sponsors, just cloth and confidence. One Friday afternoon, Elijah passed by a display case near the main stairwell. Inside, where the football trophies used to sit there, was a new setup, a single mannequin. Dressed in a navy blue hoodie, beneath it, a plaque, Silent Power. In honor of every student who chose presence over permission. He stared at it for a long time, not because he needed the credit, but because he recognized himself in something built to last. Later that evening back home, Nathaniel handed him a manila envelope over dinner. What's this? Elijah asked, wiping barbecue sauce off his fingers. Something I didn't expect to see? His father replied. Elijah opened it. Inside, a letter from the Department of Education. It read, the Fairgrove School District has completed its internal bias and harassment audit. We are pleased to report significant improvements in reporting student-led initiatives and restorative practices stemming from the Elijah Carter case. He read it again, slower this time, then looked at his dad. Nathaniel didn't smile, just nodded. "This doesn't mean it's over," he said. "I know. It just means they finally believe what we already knew." Before bed, Elijah returned to his notebook, flipped to the next blank page and wrote, "The lesson isn't in the noise, it's in the walk after. It's in the silence you choose not because you're afraid, but because you're full." He closed the cover, looked at the hoodie draped across his chair, and this time, instead of wearing it, he folded it neatly, placed it in the drawer with care. Not because he was done with it, because he knew he'd earned it. The last Friday of the semester came slow, wrapped in soft light and the smell of cut grass. Seniors posed for photos. Hallways buzzed with locker slams, yearbook scribbles, and promises no one would keep past summer. But Elijah wasn't focused on goodbyes. He was watching, not with suspicion, with purpose. Across the courtyard, a group of ninth graders huddled beneath the shade tree near the old brick wall. One of them had on a black hoodie 2 sizes too big, sleeves pulled down over his hands, hood up, even though the sun was hot. He looked like Elijah once did, invisible on purpose. Elijah watched him glance around, look down, shrink. Without thinking, Elijah stood. He crossed the courtyard slow and steady, weaving through end-of-year energy like a shadow with direction. The younger kid didn't notice him at first. He was too busy pretending not to exist. "Yo," Elijah said gently. The boy looked up startled. He was darker skinned, maybe 13, acne just starting to show along his jawline. His eyes held that mix of resistance and fear. Elijah knew all too well. Elijah gestured to the bench. "You cool if I sit?" The boy nodded. They sat in silence for a moment, just 2 hoodies in the sunlight. Then the boy asked, "You the one from the mural?" Elijah shrugged. "Depends who's asking." The kid cracked a shy smile. "My brother said you made the whole school change." Elijah looked ahead. "Nah, the school changed because folks stopped waiting for permission." The boy tilted his head. "Did you ever think about quitting?" Elijah turned to him. "Every day." The boy nodded, eyes still forward. "Me too." They talked for a while. Nothing deep, just real, just enough. When the bell rang, Elijah stood. "People will try to make you choose quiet or safe," he said. The boy blinked. "Aren't they the same?" Elijah smiled. "Nah, not anymore." He bumped fists with the kid, then walked off. Didn't turn around. Didn't need to. That evening, Elijah stood in front of the mirror. Not the hallway mirror. The mirror. The one in his bedroom. The one he used to avoid. The one that had once shown him only the things they feared. He looked now long and slow. The scar on his chin from the bike fall in 6th grade. The curve of his shoulders. The hoodie draped across his back like memory, not armor. He pulled it over his head one more time. Not because he needed it, because it had walked with him. Because it belonged. The final journal entry came that night, written in bold black ink. They judged the cloth. They feared the color. They whispered about the silence. But they forgot one thing: I was watching, I was listening, I was learning how to walk through fire. Now I walk so others don't have to burn. He closed the journal, set it on his shelf, not hidden held. The next morning, Elijah left the apartment early, walking this time. No bike, no destination, just blocks beneath his feet and rhythm in his chest. He passed the mural again. A mother was standing there with her daughter. The girl was maybe 6 tiny braids in a backpack shaped like a bear. She pointed at the wall. "Is that a superhero?" The mother smiled. "Something like that." Elijah didn't stop. He kept walking, hood up, hands in his pockets, not hiding, just walking, just being. And as he disappeared into the sunlit street, the wind tugged at his hoodie, not to take it, just to carry it forward. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the one that never had to raise itself. Elijah didn't win with fists. He didn't conquer with rage. He didn't burn it all down. He just walked again and again until the world had no choice but to follow. So if you've ever felt like your silence was a sentence, if you've ever been told your presence was too much, if you've ever walked through this world unseen but not untouched, remember you are not alone, you are not small, and you are not finished. Wear the hoodie, tell your story, walk your walk. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Silent Power Stories, where every hoodie hides a voice worth hearing. Share this video with your people, your feed, your community. Comment below. Tell us, what does your silence mean? And hit the bell, because we're not done walking yet. Because behind every hoodie, there's a black story worth telling.